Hey there, this is Molly Jo Riley, producer of the podcast. Welcome to First in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I am the curator of the Unemployment Cookbook, the creator of New Inklings Press, and the author of the upcoming romantic mystery novel, Nola. Today we have co-host Erwin Gansky, author of the Hand of Adonai series, Right to be Heard, and a few other things. Yes, Erwin?
Yeah, you're stealing my thunder. Like, how do I introduce myself now? I
you
also
don't. I shut that down.
I write other novels. I write books. I write lots of stuff. So,
He wrote a pretty good political thriller a while ago. Yes.
Sure. Who is Harrison
that what
Sawyer?
You called it? Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
But the newest one is what? Tell us what the newest one is.
Newest one is The Seven Seals. It is the third installment of my Hand of Adonai series. So been out for a few months now, and we got one more in that series, and then the story arc is complete. So
no, say it ain't so.
I mean, all good things, right? All good.
What
things.
are you gonna work on when this is over?
I'm already. It's already over. It's been done. So
what can the audience look forward to after the fourth HOA?
I will let them know as soon as I figure that out. So I've got a lot of things in the works. So I don't know what the next thing to be published will be. That's still up in the air. So, but I've got several different projects. So. That I've been juggling. So with us today, enough about me. On to Tina Yeager, who joins us for the third time in a row. Who's been
welcome back, Tina. It's been minutes since we last spoke with you.
Are you there?
Yes, it feels like so long. I'm glad
So, Tina, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it? You say that you're an author, but what is it that you write?
I write fiction and nonfiction. My book that's out now is called Beautiful Warrior, Finding Victory Over the Lies Formed Against You. It's a nonfiction book helping women identify and pursue their purpose and significance through Christ-centered identity. So that is the one that's out. I also have some fiction novels that I'm working on and trying to get placed. As Erwin said, there's lots of things working on. I'm also publisher of Inspirations Online, a devotional publication by writers for writers.
We brought that up last time, and I, if you haven't figured it out yet, audience, you're a discerning audience. You probably already know, but we tend to do these back to back, and so I haven't had an opportunity to look at that since last time. But definitely, I'm going to be bookmarking that because it just sounds like a wonderfully good resource for all writers, whether they're writing fiction or nonfiction. Definitely something to kind of keep bookmarked. And also, you said you're taking submissions. Is that correct?
Yes. If you would like to increase your platform, you can send us a submission as long as it's a devotional about writing or geared toward writers. We will certainly look at it, and we do have submission guidelines on the website, so please follow those.
Wait, we're supposed to follow submission guidelines?
Yes,
this is so strange. So
it's all about
publisher likes you more if you follow their guidelines. That's one of the things.
Okay, but Tina, I'm a creative writer. I don't fit into the rules of the world. So will you accept something that I just, put out there?
I will kindly tell you to work on it again and send it back ready. How about that?
Nice.
I don't like rejection any more than anybody else, but I will work on it a little bit more.
Great.
So, but I've got a question for you. What happens if we want to submit something, but we just can't think of what to write? What happens if we have writer's block?
Ooh, that might be the topic of our show today. Writer's block. What a great subject idea, Erwin. How did you come up with that?
I know how to transition. That's one thing I can do.
Except that you forgot the house cleaning notes first.
Oh,
follow us on YouTube.
The guidelines.
And subscribe. Yeah, follow the guidelines. Follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. First in Fiction Podcast, Erwin Gansky, Molly Riley, Tina Yeager, Tessa Emily Hall. We are all over the social media. Please like us, because if you haven't figured it out by these last few podcasts, we are really insecure creative people. We need to know that you like us. I will cry on camera if it gets more views. Okay, don't make me do that because nobody wants to see that. But realistically, we want to make this a better podcast, and we can do that by having better audience interaction. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, and then share it with all of your people. Thanks so much. Now, Tina, is writer's block real, or is it all in our heads?
Yes, and yes. See, perception is reality. So when it comes to creativity, what we think about our creativity is going to be what happens with our creativity. So it's in your head, but there's nothing more real for you as a creative than what is in your head. So if you believe you can't, then you can't. So our minds are going to operate according to the limits and the boundaries that we set for them.
So where does writer's block come from? Because you've got kind of a psychological background, and you've done a lot of research on this. So have you been able to like kind of pinpoint the source of writer's block? Why does it tend to hit more often than other things at certain times, et cetera?
There's a lot of different factors that play in, just like any other condition that we can suffer from. But I would say fear is one of the main things that makes us susceptible to writer's block. And if you think about it, creating is a vulnerable thing, and fear is the opposite of creativity. So you're risking as a creative, and you have to risk, but fear makes us not want to risk. So that tension right there is going to create a block, and it's going to keep us stuck to where we can't do that. So in order to dream of something that hasn't happened, you have to feel like a certain sense of wanting to risk, create something that isn't there. And human beings are designed to naturally fear risk. It protects us to fear risk. We don't jump off cliffs because we are naturally inclined to fear that kind of risk, and that's a good thing. But when it comes to our imagination, we need to risk in order to make something new happen. Otherwise, nothing happens.
Interesting. I did seem to, there are particular times in my career where the writer's block has been more prominent than others. And it's interesting that you mentioned fear, because I think one of the most prominent times was when I was finishing the Hand of Adonai series, when I was working on the final book. And I was kind of getting toward the end, and the book, it was a difficult monster to wrangle. And I think that it kind of stemmed from this place of fear of not wanting to end. I didn't want to finish the book. I didn't want to finish my story with the characters. I didn't want to finish. I didn't want to admit that I was kind of graduating from that type of the series, because it's kind of like sending your kids off to college. You've spent so many years with them, and it's kind of a difficult thing. So I felt some writer's block there. Is that kind of a common thing, or am I just weird?
No, I think we all experience that. That is a very common issue for writers or any kind of a creative. I was experiencing it earlier today. In fact, I need to write some magazine articles, but I haven't been doing a lot of magazine writing. So the fear of doing something I haven't done for a while is kind of, I don't want to do that. Why don't I just go do some laundry? That would be so much easier to tackle than doing the magazine writing for somebody that's probably going to reject my article. Yeah, that'd be so much easier. So I'm going to do the laundry instead. So I didn't get that done because I didn't feel like doing it. It was a fear thing. It was totally a fear thing. And just because you know what it is doesn't mean it's going to never happen.
Right. But the laundry is done, though.
Yeah.
So crisis averted.
And by the time this podcast airs, those articles will have been written.
There's a challenge. Is that a challenge?
That's a challenge.
All righty. We're gonna make that happen. Because we have to risk. We have to make ourselves do things that are uncomfortable. If we never get outside of our comfort zone, we won't do anything worth doing. Nothing worth doing happens in the comfort zone. And it's hard to not want to stay cuddled up in your warm, fuzzy blanket that you know is safe.
Yeah. I mean, why would you want to throw that in the wash and get it all, no. We're not going to have this conversation. Erin, she said something that reminded me of, what was that quote from Fitzgerald about something hard?
Nothing any good isn't very hard. I believe I'm getting it right, but F. Scott Fitzgerald, in writing I believe to his daughter, says, nothing any good isn't very hard. The idea is, if it's what's the old adage? If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. If you're going to be engaging in this kind of endeavor, it's going to be hard Of course it's going to be hard. Doing things well is a challenge. If it's easy, then you're probably not doing it well, or you're at least not doing it as well as you could be doing it. So absolutely, it's presents its own challenge in that way. But I've also noticed, and Tina, I'm jumping off the show notes here. Somebody catch me. Have you noticed that the writing you do after these intense battles with writer's block tend to be better?
Yes, they do, usually. But first I fail. I have to be willing to write badly and fail when I first go into it in order to get past that and write better. So I can't go into it thinking, oh, this is going to be fabulous. The first time I write the draft of this article or this chapter or this novel, it's going to be so wonderful that I don't have to edit it or do anything. Usually the opposite happens. I will fail first and it'll be terrible, and I have to go back and be willing to weed through all of that and make it worth producing. And that's part of what's so hard about writing, is that we know that it isn't going to be perfect, or we expect it to be perfect, and then it turns out that it's not, and we're afraid to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. You have some notes here on creativity, and I love kind of your take on it, and your kind of the position that you're coming from in terms of creativity, about it being most people seeing it as kind of abstract and intangible. Can you share a little bit more about creativity with us?
This has been studied by neuroscientists and marketplace people, because believe it or not, creativity is not just for artists. It's an important part of the business industry. If we're not being creative in business, we're not developing new products, we're not developing new efficient, better ways of delivering services. So creativity, broad spectrum wide, affects everything that we do across the world as human beings. And Charles Limb, a famous neuroscientist in your neck of the woods out there in California, says that creativity is a hardwired, deep-seated trait necessary for survival. It's important to be creative, and creativity is part of problem solving, if you think about it that way, so that we can survive as human beings. I think it's interesting that this survival trait is also a difficult thing, because we need to risk in order to survive, and yet our survival instinct also tells us not to risk. So it's really, to me, that's kind of an interesting irony there.
Absolutely.
That is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And in dealing with creativity and dealing with it as a trade, I remembering a particular prompt that my AP students had about whether or not creativity could be taught. And their argument almost universally was that creativity could not be taught. And I was firmly in the other camp, that I believe creativity can be taught to a certain extent. Now, some people are naturally more creative than others. I'll give you that. Some people are just naturally gifted athletes while others aren't. But regardless, there are still some principles that you can learn. There are kind of this out of the box type of thinking, and there are ways to encourage that. Are you kind of in the camp that creativity can be taught, or are you kind of in the camp that it can't be?
Oh, I believe it can be developed. I think we all have it to some degree, and you can develop it and make it stronger based on how you do it. Creativity is part of the whole brain. Most people think that you're only creative if you're left-handed and using the right side of your brain. And that isn't really true. The best creative products come from us when we're using both sides of our brain, and all quadrants of the brain, in fact. So we want to be sure that we're getting our brains to work together. Einstein's brain was studied, and what they noticed about that was that he had an enlarged corpus callosum, and he did bipedal exercise, used both sides of his brain together, and we believe now, with a lot of other research, that enhancing the corpus callosum by using both sides of the brain at the same time when possible and getting them to connect increases the size of the corpus callosum, and therefore increases your intelligence. So you can get smarter by developing your creativity.
I've been looking for some good Corpus Callosum exercises online, and kind of the HIIT workout for the Corpus Callosum, some like cross training, CrossFit, Corpus Callosum stuff, but it's hard to find. Is there something that you would
Yeah,
recommend?
bipedal exercise is pretty simple. You use both sides of your brain, both sides of your body while you are daydreaming and you're thinking and you're brainstorming. See, people that if you think about it, all the great minds would do this. They would go for a walk or they would go for a bike ride while they're thinking through a problem, a project, a new invention, a book, a poem, something that they're doing, they're brainstorming. They're also doing that bipedal exercise. They're multitasking in ways that work together. And that is what increases your creative flow. You've got your blood flow going, you've got your brain working on both sides, and you're using the creativity process. So it's very simple. It doesn't have to be a workout, but you can do things that way. You can even some people have at their desk a little like bicycle thingy under their desk.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit and do that.
Yeah, I'm excited because when I've done some, a little bit of research and put my thoughts together about writer's block, and one of the things that I mentioned was trying to do some exercise, but I didn't have a lot of the science to kind of back it up. So that's really interesting to see and to hear. I'm assuming that kind of stuff can also help us work through writer's block. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we need to care for our brain, and we need to care for our physical well-being. We need to care for our mind, not just the brain as an organ, but for our mind. And we need to be spiritually healthy as well. All of those things, all those parts of who we are important to nourish our creativity and to get through writer's block or even avoid it sometimes.
So can you give us some specific tips on how to do those?
Sure. For physical well-being, obviously you need to get sleep. Sleep is important. The brain doesn't work very well when we don't give it enough rest to reboot. You'll find yourself working harder to get less done if you're not rested. So not taking the time to sleep doesn't actually help you get more done. So make sure that you take time to relax as well so that you can kind of rest and meditate and reboot. And again, the bipedal exercise is important because you're getting oxygen to the brain and you're relaxing and you're not letting stress eat your body and eat your serotonin and make you distractible. You want to make sure you nourish your brain with good nutrition and hydration. It's interesting how much water can affect your ability to think straight. If you've ever been dehydrated, severely dehydrated, you know that you get disoriented, right? Well, if you're just not getting quite enough water, the same is true to a lesser degree. You're just not able to concentrate or focus. So make sure you're getting plenty of water. And there's some aromatherapy options that people find are very helpful. You can have them at your desk when you're trying to write. Lemon, peppermint, clary sage, frankincense, rosemary, or sandalwood are some of the ones that are suggested to help you think better. And deep, full breathing will also oxygenate your brain. That's one of the reasons why exercise works so well. And music, for some people, is very helpful in getting your brain to process information. For some people, it's distracting. For some people, it helps them focus. So those are some physical and mind things. Laughter we talked about in the last time, and negative thinking. Catch your negative thoughts. Make sure that you recognize which ones are your common ones. If you're getting writer's block because you're thinking negatively about your writing, catch those and don't just get rid of it. Replace it with something that's positive and true. I can do this. I have done this, and I'm going to do it before the next podcast. So those are some things that you need to say to yourself that are positive, and get other people to get around you that are going to be positive so you can drink inspiration regularly. We need that as much as we need water. It's very, very important. And play is also important. One of the things that they found in research that helped children be more creative is the way that they played. If we can recapture childlike wonder and approach art as play, then we're more likely to be productive with our art and engage with our art in a positive way. So we won't have that kind of writer's block on a regular basis because it'll be fun. You want to do something that's fun. You'll have a negative approach to something that's a chore or that's work. Children don't look at writing as a chore unless you make it a homework assignment and tell them all these awful rules, and don't approach it as a teacher as being fun, which is unfortunate that that can happen sometimes. Mm-hmm. But some good teachers still are doing a good job at making writing fun. So, and getting in art, lots of forms of art, not just writing, but other forms of art can help you feel more creative. I like to make necklaces and bracelets and things like that because it's something that I can finish and it's done. A novel might never, ever be done, it seems like sometimes. But I can do that, and it's creative and it's fun, and I have something beautiful at the end, and it kind of gets me back in the way of thinking about art. For some people, it might be cooking or baking or some other form of art. Even gardening is a form of art. So do something else that's artistic that'll help you think creatively, but get outside of your editor head. Because sometimes we get in that editor head when we're writers, and we are only thinking critically and not creatively. So you need to kind of reboot your creative side and get out of that editor side.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are all really good points. I'm struggling to think of what else to add. I feel like you've really covered the
well, playing games is good too. There's a really good game that we play as writers when we're thinking of a story. What if?
Right.
Yeah. What we used to play when we were kids, like when we would go outside and you would come up with a game that was like a drama type game, a story type game. You'd say, well, what if we had a treasure that went missing from the museum? Then what will we do? Well, what if everybody thought it was the guy down the street with the bad looking house? Remember when you were kids and you would come up with mysteries to play or something to play that was a role play kind of a game? We do it in video games now, but you have this what if game that we play as writers. If we're thinking what if, then it's fun and we're exploring the idea of the story, and it's a game. Make it into a game, play and daydream and laugh and think of silly things that your characters might really never do in your novel, but make it sort of like a game, a play thing that you can enjoy. If creativity is a point of joy and celebration, we're less likely to give up on it and get blocked.
I like to bounce ideas off other people too. I find just kind of including a very small handful of people that I trust and know well, to bounce some of the ideas off them and for them to bounce some ideas off me. I know in problem solving some other people's novels, I've ended up coming up with ideas that have really kind of helped come up with solutions to my own problems, my own novels as well, and vice versa. And they don't even have to say anything that I'm going to, that I end up using. A lot of times they're bad ideas. Not that their ideas are bad, but their ideas that I can't use will spur me to think of something else or remember something else that will kind of unblock the gates, if you will. And so I find including not a lot of people. I don't think that you should be throwing, half-written novels out there for the world to see, but just your alpha readers, just the ones that you know deeply and trust deeply. Just kind of, I've just written emails to them. I'm stuck here. What do I do? And then in the process of writing that email, I'll come up with some decent solutions, or I'll have them before they even write back. But just in the process of asking about it and kind of putting it into words specifically where I'm struggling helps me to kind of focus on the heart of the problem. So that I found that to be helpful as well.
Well, and I go back to that, Aaron, too. I think that's true, but I think it's also just the action of verbally saying out loud, having a discussion. You don't necessarily need somebody else's feedback, but you need to talk through it. And so to have that discussion back and forth is really helpful. I know when Aaron and I, in fact, it was I want to say it was last year when we were flying, when I was still in California, and we flew back from Blue Ridge. On the drive to the airport, we had a discussion about your book for 15 minutes and recorded that discussion. And then we talked about my book for 15 minutes. And just the feedback that we both got from that helped us both overcome some writer's block and some ideas that we didn't know how to move past it. And just having a sounding board And half of the things that you and I talked about for NOLA, I did not use. And the other half was stuff that I had already thought about, but just having your input of how to work that in was very helpful. I think it is very important, not just to say that, hey, I can do this and change it, but like you said, have somebody you can trust that's going to help talk you through it in a way that respects you and your boundaries and your writing style.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think we're nicer to ourselves when we're talking about our writing out loud. We're less likely to get stuck and get writer's block if we're discussing it out loud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People we're discussing it with aren't going to be nearly as mean and harsh and cruel as we will be to ourselves if we're in our own
right. Right.
So I think that helps too. And in relationship, we tend to also bring out our thinking. So our thinking exposed is often more productive than our thinking that's just internal thoughts when we get in a rut.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tina, you have notes in here about the spirituality aspect of overcoming or avoiding writer's block. Do you want to cover some of those tips?
One thing that's very powerful for a lot of different things, including writer's block, is being filled with praise and having a thankfulness attitude. When you start to thank and praise, it shifts your mindset. You cannot be negative if you're being thankful and praising. And if you have a hard time thinking of things to be thankful for, think of everything you've missed if you lost everything you weren't thankful for. Would you miss breathing? Would you miss being able to move your fingers and toes? Would you miss being able to smell? There are all kinds of things that we take for granted. And if you start to be thankful for everything that you would miss if you lost it, then your mindset will change automatically. And you'll begin to be more positive and think of possibilities and look at what you have instead of what you can't do. And meditation is also really important. Just like it's important to be with people, it's also important to let your mind just kind of rest and zone out. And I don't do the meditation where you have to have absolutely nothing in your head. I don't know how people do that. I just take whatever is in my head and then turn it over, and then turn it over, and then turn it over, and release the things that come through my mind. Because trying to get to a place where there's nothing there and stay with nothing, to me, that's frustrating. So I don't do it that way. If you can't do it that way, it's okay. You can still meditate. And journaling, sometimes that really helps people. Journaling creativity quotes or scriptures, things that are about creativity and beauty and positivity. If you're keeping a journal through those things and make them personal. Or taking a prayer walk out in nature. That can kind of reset you spiritually and help you to get more in a mindset of creation. If you're in creation, you'll be more in a mindset of creation. Just allow yourself to rest and be molded. You are a masterpiece. And as writers, we get to participate in what is a divine art. We are creators. It's an amazing and honorable opportunity that we have.
I like the way you say that, and that makes a lot of sense. I believe that creation is a high purpose, whether that's just writing novels or nonfiction books or making movies or television shows or creating works of art through sculpture or painting or music. Even creating a mathematical equation is a type of art and creation. And I think that we don't honor some of our creators enough. And that's, I think, one thing that kind of contributes to that writer's block, as we talked about like last time, is dealing with those that sense of not being validated or worthy, and that can kind of spiral us out of control. So I like that you mentioned keeping ourselves healthy, both physically, mentally, and spiritually, because it's very easy to neglect any of those, if not all of them. And you might get one right, but maybe you're lacking in the other two areas. And so trying to remember the three different areas in which to kind of keep ourselves healthy is really valuable information.
There's a book I would recommend too that kind of speaks to that divine gift of being a creative. It's called The Artisan Soul by Erwin Mcmanus. And it's just a beautifully written book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And it's also very encouraging to those of us who are artists.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look at the clock. There it is again. I've got a little clock, countdown clock there kind of blinking at me. So Really good stuff. Tina, thank you so much for joining us. Our listeners who would like to find out more about you can do so at tinayeager.com, or they can submit to, if they follow the submission guidelines, Inkspirations, or they can just stop by to get some good encouragement for their own writing there. If they're looking for Molly, head on over to mollyjoreilly.com, or frankly, my dear mojo.com. It's later for you than it is for me, but right now it feels like I'm East Coast time. Like I feel like I'm in Australia, or Japan, or whatever the one that's really far ahead. That's how late it feels to me right now. And if you're looking for me being a little more coherent, you can find me at aarongansky.com. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks for listening. And until next time, good writing.